I'd like to talk to you a little bit about kerning and tracking and leading. And so these are seems to be very detailed kinds of things, but it really aids in readability and also really. And I'm going to show you some examples of some mistaken identities and some miscommunication that can lead to be very some embarrassing situations. So I'm going to just choose a type tool and start here. I'm going to do um, tracking and kerning, and I apply that text. Now, in Photoshop, it may not be readily visible, but here's where we need to go. We need to go to the Character tool panel, and it's right up here. And it's kind of a weird looking icon. But we need to go to Character, and when we go to Character, we can see there's tracking, and it's set at right now it's -75, and we're going to do the kerning, and we'll look at that. So when we look at tracking right now, the letters are pretty close together, and especially in kerning, the R almost looks like it's an M because it's so close to the N. So what we can do is we can select our text, and then in where it says VA, we can go to a drop-down menu and we can say, okay, we don't want -75 spacing. We could go to 0, and that pulls it out considerably, maybe a little bit too far. So we can come up here, maybe -25. That looks a little bit better. In Photoshop also, you could go to this where the little icon is, and when I mouse over it, my cursor turns to 2 arrows, and I can right-click and drag to the right and drag to the left. And I can manipulate that, but I can also just type it in. So I'm going to type it into -25 right now, and got a little asterisk there. That looks pretty good, but we also have a few other problems here. That it looks to me like the T and the R seem to be a little bit too far away. And so we can see that we have this little problem, and type designers have to adjust this, and most good types do this pretty well, but we may need to tweak it a little bit. And so the R is not going to go underneath the T, and really there's a lot of negative space here that is somewhat contrasting to what the other spaces are here. So if I just select and put my cursor in between the T and the R, I can individually tweak this kerning here. And if I go to the VA, I can type in, or I can just slide again, and I like to just slide my cursor to the right or to the left, and maybe just tuck this R underneath the T just a little bit, and it may work out a little bit better. The same thing is true in the R and the N. We don't want to have those two melding into an N, so we can just bump that out just a little bit so that differentiates between the R and the N. Now, we have that ability to do that in Photoshop, where they didn't have that ability when we had set typeface. So when we look right here, in the old days when we had the printing press, these were movable types, but they were all based upon one block, and so you couldn't tuck an R underneath an N or a T because it was one solid block. I have another example here. They were just all individual pieces of type that they had to typeset, and you didn't have that ability to kern. We do have that, especially necessary because we have some of these modern fonts where you have a lot of negative space sometimes that you may need to adjust. Now, there's also one other thing, and that's called leading, and leading is the space in between lines. So if we go back to this example, and there's really none right here, but sometimes they would put a piece of lead in between lines to hold the spacing and give a little bit more negative space between text, and especially like from a headline to an article. So in order to do that, we again need to select our text, and I can just double click on the T, and that selects everything. And then we have the spacing is here. So I could change it to 12 point, which is obviously too small. I have these presets, but a lot of times you get trapped by those presets. So you can type it in, or again, you can click right here and drag it out. And we may make this a little tighter leading. Now, I could do that individual lines, or I could do them both together. So that looks a lot better because now the kerning is more readable. We've got we reduced some of this negative space. Now there are some other possibilities here, and I'll just come on down here. H2O. Now, if you needed to do something like this without having to make this on a separate layer, we can click on the 2, and this is the Superscript Subscript possibility. So I can drag this, actually it's the changing the baseline, and I can drop this baseline down. Now there are some presets here that we could drop down, but depending on what kind of font it is, you may want to do this yourself. If we wanted an exponent, we could do 5 and 2, and now I can raise this up to the power of 2, and I can also change the font size right here. I can bring this down and then raise it up a little bit more. So this is a pretty powerful palette right here. While I'm right here, paragraph and take off hyphenate if there's a bunch of text. I think sometimes that makes it harder to read as well. So, so we have the leading, we have the tracking, and we have the kerning here. So I want you to really encourage you to use those, to look at opportunities to use those. I'll give you one more example. Sometimes I'm going to start another text layer here. Sometimes if we wanted to do look, sometimes if we want to get a little bit maybe novelty, we can grab the between the two O's, and I can change the kerning here, and I can even overlap, which you could have never done with movable type. So check that out. Right here's the icon, and let's make some good type. Like I said, I wanted to show you a couple of examples of some really bad kerning that really can be an embarrassing kind of thing. Here, I'll show you this. Obviously, stop and the bridge really didn't need to happen. Here we can have some really embarrassing and sometimes offensive kinds of things. So I apologize for the offensiveness of this, but you need to really, if you kind of squint your eyes, some of these letters go together. This one is specifically talking about flickering lights. Megaflix, this is a video store, but I don't think it's communicating what they really want it to communicate. So you need to be really, really careful about what your how you set up your typeface.